Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 31 of What If Naruto Was the Red X. If you guys enjoyed this what if, and want to see part 32 of it, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Jump City. Donnie was hanging on for dear life as Dwayla drove down the streets of early morning Jump City with a laugh, and going at speeds that should have killed most likely them. Dwayla was driving what appeared to be a simple yellow mope with a SS Vespa and a sticker on the front of it. Not really surprising, Dwayla chose to forego a helmet and wore a pair of goggles over her eyes instead, a beige scarf wrapped around her neck, and a completely insane grin across her lips. "Since when do you even own a moped?" Donnie finally demanded, wearing a helmet even though she was technically 3/4 ghost and nigh impervious to physical harm. Plainly put, given Dwayla's personality, it was preordained that she'd also be a crazy driver, and would more than likely find a way to harm Donnie, without ever really meaning to. "I've had this old thing for a while," Dwayla replied with a grin while turning, moving her whole body to the side as she did. Screaming loudly, Donnie wrapped her arms around the older girl's waist and buried her face into her back. Regardless of the fact she could fly, Donnie was more concerned about Dwayla forgetting their mission. Thus the girl resigned herself to riding with the psychotic clown girl. "Then why haven't I ever seen it before?" Donnie demanded flatly, and Dwayla was silent for a few moments before frowning. Releasing the handlebars of the moped for a moment and then rubbing her chin with a thoughtful look. Cursing as Dwayla released her control of the moped, Donnie lunged forward, turning partly intangible, just enough that she could move partly through Dwayla, and took hold of the handlebars of the moped. "I think it's because I never needed it before now," Dwayla replied casually and then looked down as she saw Donnie, who had passed through her waist to get at the handlebars of the moped. "Whoa, neat," Dwayla said before turning her upper body, Donnie twitching as she did. "Does that hurt or what?" Will then asked of the ghost girl, and Donnie mentally groaned. "No," she muttered, and Will then grinned while wrapping her arms behind her head and leaned back in her seat. "Aren't you going to be taking control of this thing?" Donnie then demanded, and Will cupped her chin with the other arm still crossed behind her neck. "Nah, you're doing just fine, carry on," Dwayla replied dismissively, and Donnie had to bite her lip to keep from screaming at the clown girl. "Dwayla, do you even know how to act normal?" Donnie suddenly questioned of the clown girl, and Dwayla snorted slightly before her lips curled into a mocking grin. "Me and normal don't even share the same universe," Dwayla replied, sounding slightly more sane than normal, before humming the tune to Fully Coolly to herself, as Donnie started to bash her head into the handlebars of the moped. "Can we please focus on putting itching powder in the police's uniforms?" Donnie pleaded, and Dwayla blinked for a moment before grinning as she nodded her head, her almost pathological need to do random things sated for the moment. "Sure, I'm done being random for now," Dwayla said with a smile and a nod of her head, while Donnie truly wondered if that was even possible. "Hey look, I can see the police station," Dwayla then shouted while Donnie blinked and then frowned. "Dwayla, how do you stop this thing?" Donnie questioned, and Dwayla was silent for a moment, blinking as a nervous look crossed her face. "Actually, I forgot," she admitted, and Donnie gaped before releasing her hold on the throttle. "We're going to die," Donnie said with wide eyes before Dwayla snapped her fingers with a grin on her face. "Oh yeah, that's how you stop it," she said while reaching around Donnie to take the controls back before pulling back on them like a bike. This had the desired effect of activating the brakes, but also very nearly threw them both off of the bike before landing, a bit shaken up, beside of the police station. "Ha. And you thought we were going to die?" Dwayla said to herself with a laugh to herself, and heavily panting, Donnie looked at her with a furious glare. "Let's just get this over with," Donnie mumbled mostly to herself, while Dwayla produced a few packs of itching powder from her backpack. "You know what to do, right?" Dwayla then asked, and Donnie rolled her eyes before taking the packs, and got off the death machine Dwayla called a moped. Yeah, I sneak in and pour some itching powder in the uniforms of any cops I see. Then I move to the locker room and pour a little into any helmets I find. Geez, it's not too hard to remember, Dwayla, though I have to wonder why these guys are such lousy cops." Donnie asked no one in particular, and Dwayla shrugged her shoulders, not really sure of that either. "I think the author just wanted to make things easy for us," Dwayla then said while leaning forward on the moped and got a look from Donnie. "Author?" she asked incredulously, and Dwayla nodded her head. "Yeah, you know, the author. Oh come on, the guy writing this piece of fiction. Duh. You know, 'cause we're all actually fictional characters created to amuse people. Hell, I think the original authors in charge of me had me shot for some reason, or was it the monitors that shot me, and they didn't want to bring me back for one reason or another?" Dwayla started to explain, then questioned with a frown. "Well anyways, I was shot dead, but this new author likes me and brought me back. Isn't he nice?" Dwayla said with a wide grin across her face, while Donnie merely stared at the clown girl for a moment before shaking her head slowly. "Dwayla, what's it like living in your little fantasy world?" Donnie asked seriously, and Dwayla blinked, then pouted as Donnie flew into the police station. Crossing her arms over the handlebars of her mope, the girl then laid her chin on them before looking up to the sky with a slight frown. You know, author dude, you could have just made her believe me. Twila stated while looking to the sky, spacing out as she heard the author reply. What? Oh come on, why not? Two crazy random girls would be fun. Twila pleaded and then pouted with a huff at his next reply. Geez, spoil my fun, why don't you? Oh yeah, and why have you been giving me so much screen time lately? I thought I was going to be some wacky side character you added on a whim. Twila asked, then mused aloud while looking to the sky once more before grinning at the answer. Aw, thanks, you're way nicer than some of my other authors. And I forgive you for missing April Fool's Day this time. Twila said with a grin before a frown crossed her face. And you're especially better that one jerk who had me killed because no one wanted to deal with me. But was it the monitors in that one world? Or wait, no, the author had that one monitor kill me because I was an interdimensional anomaly or something like that. But still, why did he have to go and kill me? I know I can be crazy, and I know I'm really confused. Twila said while looking to the heavens and then blinked upon noticing several people staring at her from the street. Hey, can't you people see I'm trying to talk to the author? She demanded, and the people walked away from the crazy girl slowly. Sorry about that, anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, and furthermore, I didn't even get my own damn backstory until after that stupid monitor guy had already killed me. And do you know how much it hurts to get shot? Twila demanded while starting to rant, going on and on, even as she believed her author was now tuning her out and ignoring her entirely. Meanwhile, Donnie was infiltrating the police HQ, invisible. The girl floated through and then smirked as she saw several targets. Spotting Snake, she stiffened up before shaking as he turned and seemed to look at her for a moment. Grumbling under his breath, Snake then walked away, causing Donnie to breathe a sigh of relief, while making a mental note not to try the joke on him. Looking to her bottle of itching powder, Donnie then floated over to a man who was sleeping, and pulled his armor shirt collar back before lightly pouring some of it down the back of his shirt. The man grunted and mumbled in his sleep, and so Donnie quietly let his shirt go before moving on. Looking around, Donnie moved from person to person, discreetly pouring some of the powder down their shirts before moving on to the next one. Soon enough, Donnie nodded her head while floating out of the room. Looking into the next one, Donnie moved from person to person yet again, noticing the ones she'd already dusted were scratching the backs of their necks. Mentally snickering, Donnie continued this pattern for a while before moving into the locker room. While remaining invisible, the girl then also went intangible and went into the first locker and found a helmet. Pouring a portion of itching powder into it, she then moved from locker to locker, sometimes finding a spare uniform or two, which she also poured some into. Once that was done, and she was finally out of itching powder, Donnie then nodded her head and flew out of the locker room, only to stop at a scream. Looking to the side, she poked her head through a wall only to gape, seeing most of the cops running around screaming as they tried to reach their backs. Oh shit, Will, what the hell did you give me? Donnie demanded before flying up and out of the building to hover over the roof. Returning to the visible spectrum, Donnie then pulled out the bottle she'd been using and saw the words, itching powder, placed over it in bold lettering. Well, that isn't so, oh shit. She started to think before her eyes widened at the tiny words above the bold lettering. Those words being the near infamous Joker brand that any and all of the Joker's many products usually carried with them. Nearly dropping the bottle out of shock, Donnie then quickly caught it and turned it around to the back. The all-new Joker brand, quick-acting, long-lasting itching powder. Guaranteed to liven up even the dullest party, now lasts for several hours, while inducing horrific bouts of itchiness. Warning: may cause itching to become so bad that they go insane, loved Willa. Donnie read and felt her eyebrow twitch before she turned and flew out of the building, then grabbed Willa up. Growling, she watched as Willa blinked down at her for a moment and tilted her head. Hey Donnie, what's up? Willa asked before looking down and noticing that she was several feet off of the ground. Well, besides us, that is. Willa then mumbled with a snicker, and Donnie pulled her face to face with herself. You gave me Joker brand itching powder. Donnie demanded of the ready, and Willa blinked before grinning widely. You're welcome, she said loudly, and I heard the screams of those trying to make the itching from the powder stop. Wow, it works even better than I thought it would. Willa said with a grin on her face, and Donnie palmed her own face before lowering herself down to the ground and yanked Willa down to face her. Just shut up and tell me if there's an antidote or something like that. We don't want to drive the police insane. Donnie reminded with a slight growl, and Willa waved her off with the same wide smile on her face. Oh it was just a joke. That's not really Joker brand quick-acting, long-lasting itching powder. Willa said with a wave of her hand before one of the cops suddenly jumped out of a window, scratching all over and nearly screaming. The itchiness. Why? He shouted while trying to make it stop, and Donnie turned to Willa with a scowl. Oh really? Then what is it? Donnie demanded, and Willa grinned wider still. My own personal imitation Joker brand itching powder. My version doesn't drive you insane. It starts as a minor itch before progressively getting worse and worse, then it just lasts for a couple hours, though by then it itches so bad you'll probably feel a phantom itch for weeks to come. Willa said with a thumbs up towards Donnie, the ghost girl mutely staring at Willa for a moment before turning to look at the cop still scratching all over himself. Dear Lord, please make it stop. Make the itchy demons stop. He shouted out loudly, and Donnie twitched for a moment before she turned back to Willa yet again. I am so not pranking people with you ever again. Donnie stated while crossing her arms and walked over to the moped with a frown. Seeing this, Willa blinked for a moment before what Donnie said registered, thus she pouted dejectedly while following after her. Hey, come on, don't be like that. Willa tried to say before both turned to the cop on the ground as he started to scream again. Please Lord. I'll never take bribes from the mob again. I will never take stuff from the evidence lockers. I wouldn't even hit on our female prisoners anymore. Just please make the itching stop. The cop shouted at the sky, and Donnie twitched slightly before pinching the bridge of her nose. On second thought, since he and probably a few others really deserved it, I forgive you. Just tell me about any of your Joker brand gags next time. Donnie then said, and Willa blinked before grinning towards her partner in crime, and hopped onto the moped happily. Now then, let's go, Willa. I really don't want to know what everyone else is going to start shouting, if they think it's going to make the itching stop somehow. Donnie stated while wrapping her arms around Willa's waist, the clown girl pouting even as she revved up the moped. Ah, but that's the best part. Willa proclaimed before they sped off into the distance, Donnie groaning at her friend's words. Domino pizza. I hate you all so much right now. Nightwing grumbled out angrily at the other Titans, still fuming over being forced to relax by Donna and Kid Flash. Oh, you know you love us. Beast Boy mocked with a grin and Cyborg snickered slightly, while Raven rolled her eyes and quietly ate her salad. What could she say? Pizza just seemed to get boring when you've had it for weeks on end, non-stop, besides the occasional Tamaranian cuisine that Starfire tried to cook up. Thus while she sort of liked pizza on occasion, she also liked to eat other things. You're rich, besides, without us you'd never get away from your computer and just relax. Kid Flash noted while leaning back in his seat and chewing on some pizza, while Donna happily munched on her own. Is that supposed to be a bad thing? Knight asked flatly while munching on his own slice of pizza, and Cyborg gave him a look. It is when all you do is sit in front of the computer without sleep for days on end. Cyborg replied, and Nightwing started to grumble under his breath as Beast Boy looked over to Raven and shook his head. Dude Ray, why did you get a salad at a pizza joint? Beast Boy asked the empathy and she rolled her eyes. Maybe because I've had pizza almost non-stop for the past few months, with the occasional break being on my dates or when Starfire cooks something. Raven offered and Beast Boy blinked before shrugging his shoulders. Next to Raven, Starfire was munching on her own slice of pizza, which had sprinkles, ketchup, mustard, and weirdly enough, she had also wanted sardines. Raven visibly shivered while looking at the single slice of pizza remaining from Starfire's box. Friends, these tiny salty fishes are most delicious. What are they called again? Starfire asked and Kid Flash nearly wretched, while Cyborg turned green and Beast Boy shivered slightly. Sardines, Star, they're called sardines. Knight finally said while rubbing his temples, and Starfire grinned. I do believe that I would also like to try them with cookies, they would possibly taste very. Starfire started to say only to stop and look at the other Titans, instantly noting they were all turning grin. Perhaps that is something only I would like, yes. Starfire asked sheepishly, and the others mutely nodded their heads while she sighed as she returned to her meal. Dudes, has anyone seen Zack around here lately? Beast Boy suddenly asked while looking around for their usual waiter and Knight frowned. No? And now that you mention it, I haven't seen him since before X showed up. Knight admitted before narrowing his eyes slightly as he had a thought, and then shook his head. What was the likelihood a pizza guy was going to be a ninja? As far as he was concerned, not very good. Knight, now don't you go thinking Zack might be X. You need to lay off your work and research and just relax. Cyborg stated while leaning back in his seat, and Nightwing muttered under his breath with a frown. Please, do you believe that the Zack is alright? Do you believe that he could have been damaged during one of the more recent attacks on the city? Starfire questioned while looking to her friends, and Raven frowned before grimacing as she remembered all the bones in the sewer's well. That's one hell of a way to go if he was down there. Raven thought to herself before taking another bite of her salad, and Beast Boy decided to stop Starfire's very depressing train of thought. Dude, I'm sure Zack's fine. The guy's probably just out sick or on vacation. Yeah, it's probably just something like that, and he'll be back to annoy us again soon enough. Beast Boy assured Star, and she allowed a small smile to cross her features, while Kid Flash munched on some pizza, his feet on the table while he leaned back in his chair. Unless he got eaten by some of Ivy's plants or that snake thing from last month. Kid Flash noted aloud and Starfire widened her eyes while gasping in horror, Donna slapping the back of the speedster's head with a frown as she did. Smooth Bart, make her worry more, why don't you? Donna growled at the redhead, and he grinned sheepishly while shrugging his shoulders. Now come on guys, y'all need to chill and stop thinking like that. We're here to relax, so let go of all your worries and mellow out. Cyborg said while visibly relaxing, and the others looked at him strangely, until a familiar jingle caught their attention, and the titanium teen slapped his face. I knew it was too good to last. He grumbled out while Knight reached into his belt and pulled out his communicator. What's going on, Knight? Beast Boy asked, and Nightwing was silent for a moment before visibly twitching. Well, he said with an ominous tone, Donna spitting out her drink and Kid Flash choking on his pizza. Oh no, not her. Anyone but her. Donna complained while Kid Flash started to choke, and she slapped a hand to his back, Kid Flash panting as the pizza-induced choke passed. Well, as in the Joker's daughter herself. Or is she one of her other personalities today? Do you mean that, well? Kid Flash demanded, Beast Boy gaping and then shivering as he remembered the painted-up clown-like girl he'd fought. Dude, I was actually fighting against the Joker's daughter. Beast Boy demanded, and Nightwing nearly nodded his head while rubbing his temples. Dude, she could have killed me. Why couldn't I take on Blackfire? She's safer than fighting anyone who's actually related to the Joker. Beast Boy exclaimed, and Kid Flash, Donna, and Nightwing looked to one another before rolling their eyes. She's not the Joker's real daughter. The three said together while putting emphasis on not unreal. Then why did you guys call her that? Beast Boy demanded, and Nightwing rubbed his temples while slowly standing up. You remember how I was complaining about the Joker's daughter playing a prank on us when Pink X showed up? Knight asked, and Beast Boy thought for a moment before nodding his head. Well, that's because Dwayla has a habit of dressing up as the daughter of several villains. Thus far I've seen Catgirl, Scarecrow, Enigma, Harlequin, Card Queen, and about a half-dozen others that all reflect different villains, most of them in Gotham. Knight explained simply while Beast Boy made an O with his mouth before scrunching up his nose. Man dude, no wonder you thought she was playing a prank on us. Beast Boy admitted, and Nightwing nodded his head with a frown, while Raven sighed and wondered what the red-headed clown was up to this time. Then what exactly is she up to then? Raven asked in her usual monotone voice, and Nightwing groaned lightly. She's playing pranks on Jump City. Knight offered, and Kid Flash slammed his face into the table, even as the others all got up with Nightwing. Oh hell, not again. Does that girl have any idea how much of a psycho she is or what? I mean, I swear she knows and just loves tormenting the hell out of us for the sheer fun of it. Kid Flash shouted, and Nightwing shrugged before narrowing his eyes with a frown across his face. Doesn't matter, we've still got to stop her. Titans, move out. Nightwing ordered while he and the others all got up and rushed off, only Raven remaining for a moment, a frown across her face. What are you up to, Naruto? She wondered before sighing as she flew off after her friends to try and put a stop to whatever it was that Tartarus was up to this time. Downtown. Willa grinned while laughing as she and Donnie rode down the streets of Jump City once more, the red-haired clown grinning whiter than ever. The prank on the police had been just enough to amuse Dwayla, though admittedly it was only funny if you could actually see those men and women running around, screaming and shouting about itching demons and that one weird little green kid with the bat toupee yelling about something. Yeah. That was funny too. Though I have to wonder how many worlds have been mixed up to make this story, Mr. Author. What? Oh yeah, most are just amusing cameos with no real point to the story, besides amusing the masses of fans. Good point. Will admitted to herself, and of course to the author himself, before blinking as Donnie wrapped her arms around her neck with wide eyes, and glared at her furiously. Dwayla. We're supposed to be heading for those fountains near the center of town. Remember? Donnie shouted at her partner in crime while feeling her eye twitch, and Dwayla blinked for a moment before nodding her head with a smirk. Alright, sorry, I was kinda in the moment there. Dwayla admitted while twisting on the moped and zipped down another street with a laugh echoing behind her. Humming a song to herself, namely Ride On Shooting Star by The Pillows, the theme for her favorite show, Fully Cooley. Dwayla. Do not start humming that tune. Donnie suddenly shouted at the redhead, and Dwayla grinned innocently. Why? She asked with obvious amusement, and Donnie gave her a flat look. Because I am so not being your noda. Donnie replied, and Dwayla stopped and considered this before shrugging her shoulders, releasing the steering for her mope once more as Donnie cursed. Just as well, I'm not a pedophile like Haruko. Dwayla noted mostly to herself, and Donnie gave her a look. I'm 14, you spaz. Donnie shouted, and Dwayla scrunched up her nose for a bit. Well then I guess you're a little too old to be a Noda, then I'd you want to be an Inamori instead. Dwayla wondered with a smirk, and Donnie growled at the older teen furiously. Can we please just get to the fountain before I kick your ass off this moat? Donnie demanded, and Dwayla shrugged before grinning as Shiri took control of her moat and whooped, while turning down another street. Sliding low and using one foot to turn, Dwayla then sped down a street before spotting the Titans and grinned. Seeing a man playing an old blue Rickenbacker bass guitar to the side, an idea suddenly came to mind. Donnie, take the wheel. Dwayla ordered while gazing at the guitar with a grin, and Donnie blinked towards her red-haired friend. Wah? She questioned before suddenly cursing and grabbing hold of the controls, as Dwayla let go of them. Sticking her tongue out the side of her mouth, Dwayla then grabbed the blue bass guitar with a wide grin on her face. Hey, my guitar. The man shouted as they passed by, and Dwayla waved to him. Thanks for letting me have this. She shouted out randomly before grinning and leaned the guitar along her back like some king of baseball bat. Closing one eye, Dwayla then concentrated on the green member of the Titans intently, placing one foot forward onto Donnie's head as she did. Dwayla. Damn it, that hurts. Donnie shouted before looking back, seeing the guitar, then remembering they were on a yellow Vespa of all things. Oh no, please tell me you're not really going to. Donnie started to say before they neared the Titans, and Willa suddenly swung the guitar, slamming it into Beast Boy's head as they passed and sent him flying. Donnie gaped as she saw Beast Boy spin in midair for a moment before flying back and falling to the ground, his tongue lolling out of his mouth to one side. Oh, I knew that was going to be so funny. Willa said with a laugh to herself, and Donnie blinked for a moment before snickering lightly. Alright, I got to admit that all things considered, that it was pretty funny, and that you actually managed to pull that off is very impressive, but you're so not ever watching Fooly Cooly ever again, Donnie noted mostly to herself before telling Willa flatly as the clown girl sat down. What? Why? Willa demanded with wide eyes, and Donnie gave her a look. Maybe because you just slammed a bass guitar into the side of someone's head. Donnie replied and Willa pouted for a moment. Oh, but it was funny. Willa tried to reason and Donnie rolled her eyes. And I don't care. No more Haruko for you. Donnie stated as Willa pouted once more and hung her head. Spoil sport. The clown girl grumbled as Shiri took the controls of the Vespa, the guitar now slung over her shoulders with a leather strap. Yeah, I'm a spoil sport cause I know when a joke has gone too far. Donnie replied sarcastically, and Willa nodded her head. Glad we agree on that. Willa said with an amused grin, and Donnie couldn't help it as she started laughing. She could only take so much of Willa and her random psychotic behavior, before she'd eventually crack up and start laughing. Meanwhile, the Titans had quickly ran over to Beast Boy, said Boy seeing stars, while Cyborg scratched his head. Why does she just hit him with the guitar? Cyborg had to wonder and Nightwing, Donna, and Kid Flash all turned to give him a look. Because she literally has a need to do random acts like that, at least that's what she says. Personally, I think she did it for kicks. Knight explains to the Titanium teen while shaking his head. Starfire then stood and held up Beast Boy with wide eyes, while turning around to face Nightwing. Friend Nightwing, how am I to be awakening friend Beast Boy? Starfire asked, seeing as normally she just had to make him laugh after being hypnotized by Mad Mod. This on the other hand, was a little weird even for them. Donna, you wake him up, Cyborg I want. Knight started to say only to stop as his communicator beeped once more. Pulling it out, Nightwing then frowned as he saw another emergency had come up. Scratch that, Cyborg, you and Kid Flash head for the tech sector, Gizmo and Mammoth have been spotted down there. Nightwing ordered and then frowned as his communicator went off once more. Well, this can't be good. Kid Flash noted and Donna nodded her head in agreement as Nightwing checked the readout and gaped. Oh, you've got to be shitting me. He stated before gritting his teeth and pinching the bridge of his nose. Honestly, today was so not his day. Starfire, you and Raven head further downtown. Jinx has been spotted causing random bursts of bad luck. Donna, after you wake up Beast Boy, head for the sky and look for Private Hive and Seymour. They'll be dropping firecrackers and when you finally wake up Beast Boy, tell him to find Willa and hopefully stop her. Nightwing ordered while rubbing his face. Yo Titans, what's going on? The Titans suddenly heard and then turned to see Naruto whistling lightly while walking over to them. Hey, Nar, what up man? Cyborg asked of the blonde-haired teen, and he would have spoken had a water balloon not landed on his head, dousing him in orange paint. Looking up after wiping some of the paint off his face, the blonde frowned upon seeing Red X casually tossing a balloon of paint in one hand and laying back without a care in the world. Seeing this, Raven raised a brow before rolling her eyes, figuring it was Naruto putting Knight off his trail, or playing a joke, while Nightwing himself gaped at the two, while Lex tossed his balloon up and down in one hand. Wait, but he and you, and that means ugh, my head hurts. Knight complained while inwardly ranting about wishing it was easier to figure out who X really was under his mask. Apparently a prankster with way too much time on his hands is what's up. Naruto noted with a thin frown across his face, while the thief in question chuckled lightly, while giving the blonde a look. Yo Naruto, long time no see man. X offered while Naruto gave him a look in response, and he held up his hands. Sorry about the paint, but you should really remember to watch out for enemies at all times, constant vigilance and all that. Oh, and wasn't that one of the lessons in the academy? X noted, then wondered to himself with a smirk hidden only by his mask, as it was clear as day in his voice. Frowning for a moment as he pulled off his hat, Naruto then crossed his arms and glared up at X. You owe me a new hat, you know that right? Naruto asked flatly, and X merely shrugged while Raven actually had to bite back laughter. All things considered, the two made very convincing actors. If she didn't know any better, she might actually believe that Naruto and Red X were two different people. Alright X, what are you up to this time? Nightwing suddenly demanded, and X casually looked over to the Titans leader. Me? He asked innocently, and Nightwing twitched before letting out a growl. Yes you X, who else do you see around here with the name X? Nightwing demanded, and X tapped his chin for a moment, while Naruto grumbled about the orange paint covering him from head to toe. Good point, but X is a very popular letter you know. X noted and then flipped onto his feet and threw a paint balloon, nailing Cyborg with it. Oh, and as for what I'm up to, well, I've only got 5 words for you kid. X then said with a smirk, and Nightwing frowned. And that is? Knight questioned darkly, and X chuckled lightly. Catch me if you can. he stated before lunging off, and Nightwing growled. I'll handle X. You guys go after the rest of Tartarus. Move out. Knight ordered while running after X, and Naruto shook his head. See you later, Card-chan. Naruto offered with a wave as the girl turned and nodded before flying off, the blonde watching on silently as the Titans split up and went in all directions, and the teen smirked as he turned around with a shake of his head and walked over into an alley. Man kid, you seriously need to lighten up and learn to live a little. Naruto noted as he then sighed. Having done his job, he then dispelled himself, while leaving only a plume of smoke, as the only sign he ever even existed. Over Jump City. Starfire and Raven flew over the city, Raven mentally groaning, as Starfire wouldn't shut up about finding Jinx. Star, calm down. Raven ordered flatly while floating beside the orange-skinned princess, and Starfire fidgeted slightly. But friend Raven, how will we be doing the hiring of the Jinx when we are supposed to be doing the capturing of her? Starfire questioned, and Raven mentally sighed before thinking it over for a few moments. We don't have to capture her, Starfire, just stop her. So long as we do that, Nightwing won't notice anything. Raven replied, and Starfire frowning in thought for a moment before looking at Raven strangely. But is that not less than honest and very sneaky, friend Raven? She asked, and Raven rolled her eyes for a moment before looking down, mentally sighing when she couldn't see the spot of pink that would announce Jinx's location. And your point is? Raven asked seriously, and Starfire was silent for a moment, contemplating that before shrugging. Nothing. It is just that it will not feel right to do the lying to friend Nightwing and the others, when we are questioned about why we did not capture the Jinx. Starfire replied, and Raven crossed her arms while flying next to Starfire. We don't have to lie, Starfire. 10-1 says that Red X, Jinx and the rest of their crew are just having fun today. Raven offered the orange-skinned alien, and Starfire frowned in thought for a moment. Normal earthly fun or Beast Boy fun? She asked seriously, and a small smirk formed across Raven's lips. Beast Boy fun. Raven replied, and Starfire looked like she wanted to groan before huffing and crossed her arms. I truly do not see the appeal in humiliating others for amusement, friend Raven. Starfire stated flatly while looking very unamused, and Raven shrugged before seeing a little innocent mayhem being caused by random blasts of pink energy down below. It's probably just a way to act out and get attention. Star well with Beast Boy it is at least. I actually think Jinx and Tartarus truly enjoy causing mayhem like this, just for the sake of doing it, and speaking of whom, I think I see Jinx. Raven offered, and Starfire blinked before looking down and grinned brightly upon seeing the pink energy, as well as a dash of pink on top of a building. Oh? I see her as well. Come, we must do the hiring of the Jinx. Starfire cried before quickly flying down towards the rosette below them, Raven sighing softly before following after her red-haired friend. Soon coming to the building, Raven blinked seeing the said Rosette was sitting at the edge of the building with a smirk, her hands positioned as mock guns as she shot hex bolts from her fingers and down into random people and objects below her. You know, I never thought you'd be the type to go for this kind of thing. Raven admitted, causing Jinx to blink before turning around and quickly got up and formed a pair of hex bolts in her hands. Oh great, I was actually getting bored of causing random mayhem. Jinx said with a grin while looking to the two, and Starfire quickly put her hands forward, while Raven let out a sigh. Please wait. We do not wish to do the fighting, we merely wish to do the talking instead. Starfire said quickly, and Jinx gave the two a look, then cocked her head to the side and placed her hand on it. You must be joking. She stated flatly to the two Titan girls flatly, and Raven merely rolled her eyes before crossing her arms. Unfortunately, no. Raven stated, and Starfire zipped forward to Jinx with a pleading expression on her face. Alright, then why is she looking at me like a kicked puppy? Jinx asked with a raised brow, and Starfire still didn't cease with the look. I wish to do the hiring of the Jinx, please. Starfire said quickly, and Jinx turned to look at Raven. Does she come with subtitles? Jinx asked seriously, and Raven sighed slightly before answering for her alien friend. She wants to hire you so you can help her understand Earth courtship. Raven explained, and Jinx blinked for a moment before giving them both a strange look. Are you serious? She asked, and both Raven and Starfire nodded their heads, Jinx blinking before scratching her head as they did. Oh, then what were you going to pay me with? She asked, and Starfire blinked before looking over to Raven. What? Raven asked her friend, and Starfire sighed slightly. Do you have any of the cash monies? Starfire asked, and Raven narrowed her eyes on the older girl. Why? Raven asked with an edge to her tone, and Starfire grinned nervously. Well, perhaps because I used all of my own at the mall of shopping. Starfire replied with a nervous grin, and Raven groaned softly while Jinx snickered to herself. So, I help Red and I get to clean out all Miss Goth's cash in one fell swoop. Does this deal get any sweeter than that? Jinx wondered aloud, and Raven gave Jinx a look before grumbling to herself as she crossed her arms. Sighing softly, Raven gave a glare to a sheepish Starfire, while truly wondering why she had to be the only Titan who didn't spend all her money at the mall. Kid Flash and Cyborg were heading down to the tech sector, Kid Flash on foot while Cyborg took the T-car. So what can we expect from this Gizmo kid and his pal Mammoth? Kid Flash questioned from beside of the T-car, and Cyborg frowned slightly while keeping his eyes on the road. Gizmo is smart but completely annoying, let's leave it at that. Mammoth is all muscle and not too much in the way of brains. Cyborg reported, and Kid Flash hummed for a moment while they made their way to the power plant. However, Kid Flash then blinked when he saw some punks harassing an old man. Frowning, KF narrowed his eyes before turning to give a look to Cyborg. Hey Cyborg, I think I'll catch up with you in a bit. I see some punks who need to have a quick lesson in how to treat their elders. Kid Flash said before skidding to a halt and hurrying over to the scene. Seeing where he was going, a smirk crossed over Cyborg's face before he shook his head while continuing on. Those guys have no idea what they've just gotten into. Cyborg mused to himself while turning down another street corner on his way to the power plant. Meanwhile, Kid Flash slid to a halt where he saw a small gang of punk kids pushing around an old man. Come on Gramps, where's your money? One demanded, and the old man merely shrugged his shoulders with a slightly amused twinkle to his eyes. Unfortunately, I haven't got any with me, probably even left my wallet in my other pants. The old man mused while tapping his chin for a moment, and the leader of the punks frowned before throwing a punch at him, Kid Flash zipping over and grabbing his wrist before it could connect. You know guys, this is really not how you're supposed to treat your elders. Kid Flash said with a shake of his head, and then sighed as another of the punks threw a punch at him, and he threw the leader into him. Thus the others all got ready for a fight as well. Why do they always have to learn everything the hard way? Kid Flash wondered to himself before quickly lashing out and knocking 3 of the punks down, before turning to the final few punks, only to gape as the old man he'd seen suddenly lashed out and grabbed one by his arm. The old man then twisted around while ducking low to the ground, and kicked the feet out from under him, while throwing him back and down to the ground. Rising up, he lifted an arm to block a punch from another punk, before slamming a fist into his gut, knocking the wind from him before raising his hand, slamming it into his face, and laying him out as well. Sighing, the old man tapped his chin for a moment while the final punk tried to come at him from behind. Smirking, the old man then moved his arm back, hitting the punk in the gut before raising his hand and slamming it into the punk's face. As the punk fell to the ground, the old man let out a slight chuckle at the gaping jaw of Kid Flash before grimacing and rubbing his back. Groaning slightly, the old man then stretched slightly, arching his back and then looking to Kid Flash with a slight smile on his face. Oh, sorry if I wasn't much help there, but these old bones just aren't what they used to be. Think I might have actually pulled something. He offered, and Kid Flash blinked once more before rapidly shaking his head as he looked at the strange old man silently for a few moments before suddenly grinning. That was so awesome, Kid Flash exclaimed, and the old man blinked before chuckling lightly to himself. Where did you learn to do that? Kid Flash questioned, and the old man stroked his chin for a few moments before grinning slightly, that same strange twinkle of amusement in his eyes yet again. Don't remember? He offered, and Kid Flash gaped before shaking his head. Reaching around in his coat, the old man then smiled as he produced a candy bar and flipped it in hand, before catching it between his forefinger and middle finger, and held it towards Kid Flash. Here, for the help. It's the least I can offer to such a nice young man. The old man offered, and Kid Flash blinked for a moment while taking the candy bar, then blinked while looking to him. But he started to say, but the strange old man simply patted his shoulder with an odd smile on his face. Oh, don't think I'll take a no for an answer, go on, take it. It's the least I can offer, and besides, what's an old fart like me going to do with a chocolate bar? The old man questioned of the teen speedster, and Kid Flash blinked yet again, and would have spoken up had he not turned to see the old man walking away. Blinking again, Kid Flash looked at the chocolate for a moment before scratching his cheek. That is one seriously strange old man, he said mostly to himself before shrugging and took a bite of the chocolate, before running off to catch up to Cyborg he never saw, as the punks he and the old man took down burst into plumes of smoke, each with a smirk. Meanwhile, down the street, the old man from before is whistling to himself, smirking as he reaches into his clothes, and pulls out a wrapper for the chocolate he gave to Kid Flash. Turning down into an alley, he then looks to either side before his form shimmers, now revealed to be a clone of Naruto himself, garbed in red X gear. Man, that was just way too easy, Naruto said to himself while throwing the wrapper for the chocolate laxative into a nearby dumpster with a grin across his face. After finally waking up from the minor concussion brought on by getting a base to the skull, Beast Boy had come out of it groggy and dizzy to say the least. Afterwards, when he heard how he had a bass guitar, a blue Rickenbacker no less, slammed into his head by a chick on a Vespa moped, he'd actually laughed his ass off. Not that the base to his skull didn't hurt, or that he wasn't a little pissed about it, but the fact was Beast Boy realized that Whale had actually been mimicking one hair Haruko from one of his favorite animes, Fully Cooley, for that particular stunt. And given Whale's outrageous personality, Beast Boy could say without any shadow of a doubt that Whale, if she actually tried, could make more than just a convincing Haruko. However, currently Beast Boy is following after Whale and Donnie, quietly watching as the two drove down the streets of Jump City on their moped. Dude, this is so not fair, how come bad girls get a moped and I don't? Beast Boy wondered to himself with a pout as he flew overhead as an eagle, watching the two as they slid to a halt in front of a fountain. Dude, what are they going to do at a fountain? Beast Boy had to wonder to himself while watching as the clown and ghost girls got off of the yellow moped, the base from before held over her torso with a strap. And for that matter, why does the clown girl leave and have hair Haruko's moped and base? Beast Boy wondered while staring at the two as Dwayla bobbed her head from side to side, humming a nameless tune to herself as Donnie followed. Beast Boy slowly slid forward and watched as Dwayla casually flipped something like a coin in her hand. Raising a brow, Beast Boy watched her catch it before flicking it into the fountain, then quickly grabbed Donnie's forearm and started to run with a wide grin. Blinking in confusion for a moment, Beast Boy watched the fountain for a moment as well before snorting. The green jester then fell back laughing as a mountain of foam exploded from the fountain, thus covering all in his path. Beast Boy covered his mouth in a vain attempt to stop his laughter, before seeing people being pushed back by the foam. What was even sillier was when a few passerbys started to laugh as well, only for globs of the puffy white foam to be thrown at them. This in turn seemed to start a massive foam ball fight between several young teens and kids, most pelting one another and of course some of the nearby adults. Laughing fully at the silly, outright childishness of the prank the two girls pulled, Beast Boy actually started to applaud before wiping a tear from his eye. Dude, that is like so priceless. Beast Boy exclaimed while holding his sides from the intensity of his laughing, then shook his head with a grin and looked at Dwayla as she hopped onto her mope with Donnie and drove off once more. Snickering for a moment, Beast Boy then jumped up and flew after them before he realized something. They're not attacking the city, they're all just pranking it. I get it, they're just having a little harmless fun for once. Beast Boy realized and then blinked before considering stopping Dwayla and Donnie before they could, most likely, set off more of those foam charges around the city. Looking back down where several kids were having fun, Beast Boy considered it for all of a few moments before he spotted Kitten. Well, if they're not up to anything really evil, I don't have to catch them, and I haven't seen Kitten in a while. He mused to himself before hopping to the ground and running over to Kitten to catch up with his girl Dwayla. Donnie and the rest of Tartarus could prank anyone they wanted, just so long as it wasn't something dangerous. Beast Boy decided it wasn't really worth getting bent out of shape about. Power plant. Cyborg ran into the power plant with a scowl across his face, Kid Flash appearing at his side a mere few seconds as he entered. So what's the plan, big guy? Kid Flash questioned and Cyborg smirked while turning to the red-headed titan. We go in, kick their butts, then head home in time for dinner. Cyborg replied, and Kid Flash grinned slightly as they turned a corner and ran towards the man controls. Ah, simple yet effective, I like it. Kid Flash offered and Cyborg rolled his eyes as they came closer to the door to the controls. Seeing it was knocked down, Cyborg narrowed his eyes and formed his Sony cannon while sliding into the room. Hold up, he ordered upon seeing Mammoth and Gizmo, both turning and groaning upon seeing the two titans. Aw shit, Temp never said what to do if two of the titans came after us. Gizmo muttered lowly and Mammoth merely cracked his knuckles ominously. Guess we'll just have to improvise a little. Mammoth stated and Kid Flash rolled his eyes for a moment. Oh please, do you guys actually erg? Kid Flash started to say only to stop and groan while holding his stomach. Blinking for a moment, Cyborg turned to the redhead, Mammoth looking on as well, while Gizmo thanked whoever gave him that distraction. Somewhere in the city, Naruto sneezed for a moment before getting back to his work. Kid Flash, you okay man? Cyborg gasped and Kid Flash suddenly stood bolt upright with wide eyes. Sorry Cyborg, but I really got to go. Kid Flash said faster than Cyborg could actually comprehend, and then moved like lightning, rushing off, leaving a trail of fire in his wake. What was that all about? Mammoth wondered to himself, and Cyborg shook his head before holding his Sony cannon towards him with a scowl. I don't know, but I'm still taking your asses into prison. Cyborg stated and Gizmo used a mirror from his backpack to see what was going on when he had an idea and grinned cruelly. Quickly finishing his program, Gizmo hit a button, and everything in the power plant suddenly started to hum loudly. Looking around warily as everything glowed brightly, Cyborg narrowed his eyes on the tiny tear. What the hell did you just do? Cyborg demanded and Gizmo turned, crossed his arms, and grinned at the titanium titan. Wouldn't you like to know, barf bag? He taunted while tossing a pair of goggles to Mammoth, and the hulking teen snickered, before pulling the goggles on as every light in the place suddenly glowed brightly, and then shut off completely. What the? Cyborg started to wonder before grunting as Mammoth quickly moved forward and rammed into him, knocking him back before Cyborg could get his bearings. Stupid, don't lose track of them. Cyborg said under his breath while turning on a sensor in his eyes that allowed him to see Gizmo and Mammoth. Alright boys, playtime is over. Cyborg roared while lunging forward, and Gizmo and Mammoth nodded to one another before grinning towards Cyborg. We couldn't agree with you more. Mammoth said before ducking down and tripping Cyborg off his feet. Oh shit. Cyborg called out as his momentum caused him to slam into and destroy the main control console for the entire power plant. Oops. Cyborg mumbled to himself while Gizmo laughed to himself and Mammoth snickered lightly. Ha, that was priceless, eh Mammoth? Gizmo exclaimed, and the gargantuan teen snickered while nodding his head in agreement. "See you later, Robo-Wimp." Gizmo shouted while Kid Wick appeared from the wall and formed his cape around them, pulling Gizmo and Mammoth away, while Cyborg got up and turned on the light from his shoulder. Looking down at the damage he caused to the control panel, Cyborg grimaced while palming his face tiredly. "Oh man, I'm so going to get chewed out for this later," he said to himself while feeling a slight breeze, and turned to look at his side as a panting Kid Flash slid to a halt next to him. "What'd I miss?" Kid Flash asked, and Cyborg would have answered only for the red head to groan and hold his stomach once more. Hold that thought," he mumbled out before quickly running away, leaving Cyborg to raise a brow and wonder what the hell had gotten into the red-haired speedster. Shaking his head at that thought, Cyborg looked around for a moment and then palmed his face before making his way out of the building so he wouldn't break anything else. Elsewhere, Naruto's clone is currently leading Nightwing on a merry chase across Jump City, an amused smirk across his lips. Looking back for a moment, X chuckled to himself before lunging forward, then jumped and landed on a flagpole. Turning on the pole in a fluid motion, X crossed his arms and cocked his head to one side. "What's the matter, kid? Can't keep up?" X taunted, and Nightwing growled low in his throat before reaching to his belt and pulled out several electrical discs. "Don't count on it, X." Nightwing roared while quickly jumping onto a platform above them and threw one of the discs. Cursing, X flipped back and shimmered before reappearing on the building opposite Night. Growling low in his throat, Night fired a grapple and swung over to X, the thief quickly running away. In his own mind, X was laughing his ass off, sure he was nothing but a copy of Naruto, but this was truly too amusing. "I'm distracting the kid while the real me finishes the finale elsewhere. Heh, I actually feel important," X thought to himself before rolling to the side to evade another electric disc from Nightwing. "Get back here, X," the Titan shouted at him angrily, and X mentally snickered to himself. "Yeah, I'm really going to stop and make this easy for you, kid. Man, does he honestly think that'd work?" The skull-masked thief had to wonder before forming an explosive X in one hand, and turned quickly. Mentally snickering, Naruto threw the X towards Night, and the teen ducked to the side. However, the explosive X veered away from Night, and instead slammed into one of the beams holding up a water tower. As soon as the X hit, it detonated, and Night widened his eyes before cursing and running out of the way as the water tower came down. Narrowing his masked eyes, Night then turned and saw X somehow running along an electrical wire to a building across from them. He'd do really well in a high wire act, Night noted before shaking his head and lunged after the skull-masked thief. Jumping onto the wire, Night cursed while holding out his arms to steady himself. While he could do this trick as well, it was more than apparent that X was much faster than him at it. Gritting his teeth, Night hopped to one of the poles connecting the wires and smirked. "Good thing I can still jump pretty far," he mused while jumping from pole to pole and running after X once more, pulling another stun disc from his belt before hurling it towards X. The said thief quickly rolled to the side to evade, and then pushed himself into a lung, grabbed a hanging ladder, and began to climb up its length. "You won't get away this time, X," Night shouted before jumping onto the side of the building and jumped up, grabbing part of the ladder, and started to climb it as well. "You say that every time we meet, kid." X can't help but muse to himself for a moment while still climbing the ladder. Looking back, X snickered for a moment when he saw how slow Night was before then rearing his body back, and then launched himself up a ways, then repeated this while leaving Night gaping behind him. "I know he's from a universe full of super ninja, but why is it so hard just to keep up with him?" Nightwing mentally demanded before shaking his head and hurrying up the ladder, while X started to go out of sight on top of the next building. Meanwhile, X himself was running across the roof of the building, flipping over several obstacles before jumping off of the roof and over to the next. Landing in a roll while forming several X shuriken into his hand, X came out in a crouch, and quickly threw the shuriken towards the black-haired teen. Cursing, Night ducked down while the shuriken flew over him, and then growled as he saw X was getting away. Blinking, X then saw as all of the lights around the city suddenly started glowing brightly. Behind him, an equally confused Nightwing looked around until cursing as all of the lights started to explode in a shower of sparks. "Looks like Giz and Mammoth managed to get the power plant, not bad guys," the clone thought while snickering to himself as he saw this. Naruto jumped over and onto a light post before jumping off of it and onto a traffic light, before jumping off that onto another light post, and then flipped up and ran up the side of a building to another roof. Behind him, Night narrowed his eyes while following after X, firing a grapple to follow him faster. Quickly getting up, Night jumped to the ground and saw X jump up, and then slide down an electrical wire while keeping his balance, causing Night to gape. "Wow, even I've got to admit that that's impressive," Night said mostly to himself before jumping off the building and opened the wings of his suit. Gliding down after X, Night landed in a roll before lunging after the skull-masked thief. At least we're not on his turf now, Night thought to himself, since it was clear that X was superior in getting around from roof to roof. Meanwhile, X was grinning as he jumped up and came down in a slide along some of the foam that Wela had created. "Yada. Watch out coming through." X called out with a grin as he twisted and turned around people and even some foam balls being thrown by some kids, teens, and now even some adults. Ah, everyone needs a day to act silly every now and again. X thought to himself before flipping off of the foam and ran towards the Jump City Park. Placing a hand to his ear, the skull-masked thief then activated his communicator and set it for Billy Numerous. Ah, hello. Billy's voice came and X chuckled to himself for a moment, while turning to see Knight was still chasing him, only now he was covered in foam and scowling deeply. Billy, how much longer till you and Blackfire will have that van ready? X asked and Billy hummed for a moment. I'm just about done with it, partner. Tell me where you'll need me and I'll be there. Billy replied, and X grinned as he had an idea cross his mind. Alright, I'm going to lead Nightwing into the park. Be ready at the entrance to it and you can grab him there. X stated and heard Billy snicker before giving an affirmative, while Lex turned the communicator off. Man, why haven't I done something like this in so long? X wondered to himself while sliding and turning at the same time, and then lunged towards the park, while Knight cursed and slid past him. Growling, Knight slammed a fist into the ground before lunging after X into the park. Meanwhile, in an old impound lot a couple blocks away from the park, Billy is lying on the ground as he fiddles with some wires under the dashboard of the car. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Blackfire suddenly questioned with a raised brow while leaning into the side of the van. In her hand is a bottle of some kind, one like you would see for condiments, and she is currently sipping it as if it was some kind of soft drink, truly proving she is indeed Starfire's sister. Yeah, Billy knows what he's doing, but you don't know what you're drinking. Billy replied while looking towards Blackfire, and she rolled her eyes slightly while sipping on her drink. Billy got to know, is that mustard you are drinking? The red-haired Texan questioned and Blackfire gave him an incredulous look for a moment. You don't even joke like that. Mustard is probably my least favorite of your earthling foods. Blackfire stated and Billy blinked while she went back to sipping on her drink once more. Alright, I'll bite then. What is it you are drinking then? Billy questioned and Blackfire looked to him and smiled while holding the bottle affectionately. Ketchup. It's got such a lovely flavor, almost like my favorite. Blackfire started to reply, and Billy tuned her out while continuing his work on the van. Billy swears he don't understand how these aliens can eat the stuff they do without getting sick. The Texan metahuman thought to himself before grinning as he tapped a couple wires together and created a spark, the van starting up as he did. Alright. Time to go. Billy then said and Blackfire climbed into the back of the van with a grin on her face. This is going to be so much fun. The dark-haired Tamaranian said with a grin while Billy sat up, a couple of clones popping out of his body and waiting for their moment. Yeah, Billy, this is going to be right blast. One of the clones said and the other clones instantly started agreeing with each other. As they did, Blackfire raised a brow for a moment before rolling her eyes as they zipped off, out of the impound lot and towards the park. Grinning Billy then lifted a hand towards his ear and pressed down on a concealed button. As he did, Naruto was flipping around, through, and over trees with Nightwing still hot on his heels. I'll give the kid one thing, he sure is stubborn. The thief thought before getting the message from Billy, a grin spreading as he did. Yes. Finally time for the best part. The blonde skull-masked thief thought to himself before lunging towards the exit of the park as a van slid to a halt before it. Nightwing was still hot on his heels, and as X passed the van, he turned and watched the doors fly open, Blackfire lunging out and grabbing Nightwing before pulling him in. Snickering once more, X hopped into the van and looked around before closing the doors with one of Billy's clones. Turning around, X cracked his knuckles, while a couple of the Billies grinned while holding some rope. Blinking for a moment, Knight looked at them warily before cursing as they pounced, quickly tying him up. I don't know what you're up to, X, but you'll never get away with it. Nightwing growled out and X yawned, while one of the Billies held up a camera. Ready for your close-up, Suga? Billy asked Blackfire, who was putting on some violet lipstick and winked towards the redhead, causing him to swoon. Seriously, what are you guys up to? Knight asked with confusion, and Blackfire grinned towards him mischievously. Oh, nothing bad, we're just having a little bit of fun. Blackfire offered before grabbing Knight by his face and pulled him into a soul-stealing kiss. The former boy wonder's eyes widened in shock before all higher brain functions ceased, even as a flash registered at the back of his mind. Meanwhile, Lex was removing Knight's belt, and the Tamaranian princess smirked while releasing the kiss, Knight looking at her with wide eyes, while Billy took several more pictures at the priceless look over his face. Oh boy. Looks like the good boy enjoyed himself. Billy noticed with a grin, while Lex slung Knight's belt over his shoulder and looked over to the smirking Blackfire. So how was it? Knight asked casually and Blackfire smirked while taking a mock thoughtful expression. Not bad, but I've had better. The alien princess replied before turning towards the driving Billy, while Knight continued to gape, all higher functions of his mind currently on overload. Hey yo, look up ahead. Billy suddenly called out, and X looked and saw that Gizmo, Mammoth, and Kid Wicked were up ahead. Pick up the hitchhikers, Billy my boy. X ordered and Billy nodded his head with a grin, while putting his foot on the brakes to come to a screeching halt before the other members of Tartarus. About time you clutch brains got here. Gizmo complained while getting into the van beside of Billy, followed by Kid Wicket while Mammoth got into the back. Now to our final destination. X cried out while pointing, and Billy put the pedal to the metal as they drove off at speeds that would have gotten them arrested, had the police not been a bit busy nearly itching to death. Meanwhile, Jinx, Starfire, and Raven are in the mall, all three girls coming out of an ice cream shop. So you mean to say that the unhealthy sugar candies are only given by the boy, mostly to keep a girl interested in further courtship? Starfire questioned while walking with Raven and Jinx, all three having a cone of ice cream. Not really, sometimes they do it just to be sweet or romantic, or in other times for an apology. Jinx replied while licking her ice cream, while Raven looked about ready to cry with the amount of money she was forced to pay Jinx, then had to treat the Rosette to a night on the town. Oh? Then the giving of candies is a male ritual, yes? Starfire questioned and Jinx frowned slightly while rubbing her chin while they walked out of the mall and out onto the streets of Jump City. Nah, girls can do it too. I mean Leviathan, this one girl that Mammoth had a thing for back in the academy, well she once got chocolate, and they ate them together on our couch. Honestly the mushy lovey-dovey stuff from those two nearly made me hurl, and I like mushy stuff. Jinx replied, and Starfire blinked before frowning to herself as she tried to understand what Jinx just explained. So, the giving of the candies is just to be, as you say, nice? Starfire questioned and Jinx looked to Raven, and both nodded their heads. Oh, thank you, now I would like to know of the taboo of displaying affection. Starfire questioned and Jinx blinked for a moment before giving the redhead a look. Taboo? What taboo? Jinx asked and Starfire tilted her head slightly. I believe they call it PDA on the TV, yet I do not understand why they would call the taboo after a device. Starfire admitted and Jinx snorted before snickering into one hand, while Raven remained silent. PDA means public displays of affection, Starfire. Jinx told the alien princess and she frowned before making an O with her mouth. So then it was merely an acronym? Starfire questioned and Jinx nodded her head with a smirk. Oh, thank you for telling me then, though I am afraid that I still need to understand the taboo with such affection. Starfire said with a slight bow of her head, then admitted with a tilt of her lips to the side, and Jinx rolled her eyes. First and foremost, it's a distraction to others. Second, only some forms of affection aren't allowed to be displayed publicly. Holding hands, hugs, soft kisses, and other small things are allowed. Just don't go grabbing him in places or hot and heavy making out in wide open, and you should be fine. And even then it's not a rule so much as it's being polite to keep your private life to yourself. Jinx explained and Starfire blinked before making an O with her mouth once more. So that is what it means. I had feared it meant you were not allowed to do anything in the public setting, though I suppose that makes a bit more sense. Thank you once more for explaining. Starfire said with a nod of her head before they stopped as they saw pandemonium was breaking loose all around them. It would seem your team is quite good at the pranking of the city. Starfire noted and Jinx nodded her head with a smile, then blinked as a van flew past them. Was that Billy Numerous driving that van? Raven questioned and Starfire looked to her friend with a strange look. I do believe it was friend Raven that is most freaky, yes. Starfire questioned and Raven nodded her head, then both turned to a snickering Jinx. Something tells me you have something to do with this. Raven stated and Jinx blinked before a catty smile crawled over her features, while she gave them a too innocent to be real look. Me? She asked and Starfire frowned before cracking her knuckles, causing Jinx to groan. Alright, Billy and Blackfire probably just kidnapped Nightwing, and are going to drop him off at his fan club. She said in a resigned tone, Starfire's eyes bolting open with a horror-filled gasp. Oh no. The last time that happened he was nearly torn apart and then mauled by his many overly obsessed female fans. Starfire said, and Jinx looked to Raven with an incredulous expression across her face. Last time? She demanded of the violet-eyed Titana, and Raven sighed wearily while rubbing her temples. Trust me, you don't want to know. Raven responded with a shake of her head, while Starfire shot into the air before turning to Raven. Please excuse me friend Raven, but I'm afraid that I must be leaving. I have to save friend Nightwing. The Tamaranian princess exclaimed before launching after the van and both Raven and Jinx stood there for a moment. So what now? Jinx asked and Raven silently mulled that over for a moment. Were you planning on pranking me? Raven questioned with narrowed eyes on the rosette and Jinx shook her head. If I did, Tem would be mad at me. She reminded and Raven gave her a strange look for a moment. What? The girl demanded and Raven crossed her arms over her chest with a frown. You do realize you're practically obsessed with Naruto and pretty much idolize him, right? She asked the other girl flatly, and Jinx growled low in her throat while glaring at the Titana furiously. Hey. I knew him before you, I liked him before you, and as far as I'm concerned you're not good enough for Temp. The Rosette shouted at Raven while poking her in the chest, and Raven felt her eyebrow twitch. And what exactly is that supposed to mean? The sorceress demanded through gritted teeth, and Jinx held up one hand. You mean, cynical, have no sense of humor, constantly shut yourself off from others, and what's worse is you can barely feel any emotion. The Rosette pointed out and Raven placed her hands onto her hips. My personality isn't up for debate here. If Naruto really found it so undesirable, I wouldn't even be with him now would I? And as for my powers, I can express my emotions when I wear a pair of magical rings. Raven told the girl with a dark glare in her violet eyes, and Jinx frowned. But there's still the fact that you can blow up people with your powers even on accident. Jinx reminded, and Raven narrowed her eyes onto the rosette furiously. Now that's a low blow even for you. And I've never once willingly hurt Naruto with my powers, accidental or not. Besides, I bet your powers could burn him alive, electrocute him, trap him in the floor, or some other unfortunate situation that might lead to his death. Raven reminded the pink-eyed girl with her eyes glowing white as a street lamp melted. What? Jinx demanded, her own eyes glowing pink as a newsstand suddenly sparked pink, the gust of wind blowing away all the newspapers from it. My powers have yet to spontaneously hurt someone I care about, you stupid bitch. And besides that, they only go wonky on Friday the 13th. Jinx shouted while several nearby civilians ran away from the two, random sparks of pink hex energy and black demonic power flowing into this, and that around the two furious girls. Friday the 13th is unlucky for you. Oh, how cliché, I thought you were at least more original than that. Raven taunted the rosette, and Jinx growled darkly. This coming from a half-demonic bitch. She shouted, and Raven snarled. Snake-eyed, cunt. Raven shouted back, and Jinx clenched her fists, pink energy forming around them. Bird-brain slut. Jinx shouted back, and Raven formed black energy around her hands while clenching them as well. That's it. I've had enough of you and your mouth. Raven roared out demonically while her eyes turned bright red, two more forming on her brow, and Jinx roared out before pouncing the other girl. Both attacking one another viciously as blasts of pink and black energy tore the street around them apart. Meanwhile, still driving through the city, Billy looks into one of their mirrors and blinks when he sees a pink and black mushroom cloud behind them. Hey, did any of y'all bring a nuke with you? Billy asked seriously, and the other members looked at him strangely before shaking their heads. Weird, then I wonder what that cloud came from. Billy wondered to himself, and Gizmo slapped the back of his head. Who cares? This is the best fucking day of my life. I've never had so much fun humiliating someone before. Gizmo exclaimed with agreements from the rest of Tartarus as they continued through the city. When will we reach our target anyways, Billy? I think it's about time to let Birdbrain meet his fans. Blackfire questioned with a grin, and Billy looked back with a wider grin as they slid to a halt. We're here, y'all. Billy replied, and X and Mammoth grinned towards one another before grabbing Nightwing. Making their way out of the van, they then went to the building and knocked on the door. When it opened, both X and Mammoth saw several girls were inside, and the two criminals grinned widely. Special delivery, they said while throwing Nightwing into the lion's den and Night widened his eyes. Aw, hell, not again. He thought while sweating bullets, and X suddenly gave a mock salute. Have fun, he said while Billy snickered, and the two quickly left, leaving a screaming Nightwing behind as they zipped off into the city laughing all the way. Seconds later, Starfire slid to a halt in midair, and gasped as she heard Nightwing's screams from inside the building. Narrowing her eyes, the Tamaranian princess lunged towards the building and broke through the door. Inside she saw a frantic Nightwing looking at her, portions of his suit somehow ripped and torn off of him, dozens of female fans trying to hug-kiss him all at once. For the love of God, Starfire, help me. Nightwing pleaded, and Starfire cracked her knuckles while narrowing her eyes dangerously onto the girls. Get your hands off of him. Starfire roared out furiously, her eyes glowing a bright glowing green as she lunged inside, random blasts of green energy puncturing the building from the inside out. Meanwhile, back on the streets of Jump City, Tartarus is riding in their van down the street when Billy spots Donnie and Dwayla on her moped. Hey look yo, it's the little missus as well as the crazy clown girl. Billy noted, and X nodded his head with a smirk for a moment before rubbing his chin. Mammoth, open the doors so we can let the girls in. X ordered, and Mammoth nodded his head before throwing the doors to the back of the van open. Chuckling to himself, X climbed onto the top of the van and gave the girls on the moped a mock salute. Hello ladies. Looking for a ride? X asked, and Dwayla took a mock thoughtful look for a moment. Depends, promise to be nice to us. Dwayla asked while sounding surprisingly innocent for whom she was, and X merely chuckled. Of course we will. The skull-masked thief replied, and Dwayla grinned widely. Good enough for me. She shouted while putting the pedal to the metal and caused her Vespa to jump into the back of the van. Hey guys, how's tricks? Dwayla then asked, and caused a slight snicker to go through the rest of Tartarus as she did. Great. They all replied, and X then stuck his head back into the van and gave a peace sign to them. Alright gang, find Jinx, Private, and Seymour and head on home. My real self should be done with his part of the prank, so he'll be seeing you later. X offered before dispelling himself, and Mammoth closed the doors to the van, as it then swerved into a turn down the next road. Meanwhile, Beast Boy walks down the street humming a light tune to himself. He and Kitten had a short date, not too long since most of the power was out around the city, but on the bright side they did get a discount on ice cream, since it was going to melt if the power didn't come back on. Smiling widely, the boy then sees Cyborg and Kid Flash trudging towards him and blinks. Dudes, what happened to you? The green changeling questions and Cyborg sighs to himself while rubbing his face. You don't want to know and I don't want to talk about it. Cyborg states, and Kid Flash would have added something, only he grunted and held his stomach instead. Itago, he said quickly before running off, and both Cyborg and Beast Boy blinked before looking up as Donna came down between them. However, the girl had one eye twitching, and her hair was seriously frazzled now. Also, it looked like numerous scorch marks were covering her, so also leaving dark splotches on her pale skin, while her costume was slightly torn, and showing as some of her black bra under it. Donna, why is your... Beast Boy started to say, and Donna held up a hand while glaring at both boys dangerously. Don't say anything. The Amazon growled out, and both teens turned from her, and started to whistle lightly while Starfire landed nearby, Nightwing in her arms twitching violently. My hair. Richard, what happened to you? Donna demanded while moving towards her friend, and Starfire growled darkly as she got too close to him. Fangirls. Nightwing replied, and both Beast Boy and Cyborg winced. Ouch, and you got the seriously aggressive ones too. Cyborg noted with a shake of his head, and Beast Boy smiled slightly. Man, that makes me glad most of mine are the shy ones. Why is that anyways? Beast Boy suddenly wondered, and Cyborg shrugged his shoulders before Donna cleared her throat. As interesting as that is, where are Bard and Raven? She questioned, and Kid Flash slid to a halt near them with a low groan and overdramatic tears in his eyes. It burned so much. Kid Flash groaned out, and Beast Boy snickered to himself. Dude, did someone slip you laxative? Beast Boy questioned, and Kid Flash groaned lightly while Cyborg winced to himself. Yikes, talk about harsh, although with your speed that's probably the only way to keep you out of the way. Cyborg mused and got a glare from the speedster as a result. Just shut up, man, it's been a really long day. Kid Flash grumbled out, and the rest of the Titans nodded their heads in agreement with him. Dudes, where's Raven? Beast Boy suddenly wondered, and Starfire blinked. The last I saw her, she was with the Jinx. Starfire said, and Nightwing frowned slightly before figuring she meant fighting with Jinx. Well, at least one of them will be caught. Cyborg moaned out while rubbing his scalp. As for me, I'm heading home and then to bed. Cyborg said mostly to himself while walking off, and Beast Boy yawned and stretched his arms out. Yeah dude, sounds good. Beast Boy admitted, both Donna and Bard agreeing with them on being too tired to chase Tartarus around Jump City anymore. A friend Nightwing? Starfire asked while looking to the boy, and he twitched violently for a moment. Just take me home, Star. Knight stated while bowing his head, and Starfire frowned in worry for a moment. But what about friend Raven? The alien princess questioned, and Nightwing gave her a look. She can take care of herself. Besides, I think she asked for the night off to spend with Naruto when we were at Piano Pizza earlier. Knight stated, and Starfire nodded her head before flying into the air and then off towards Titan's tower. Elsewhere, Raven and Jinx were sitting in the middle of what had once been a soon-to-be-demolished building. The building was now totally demolished, thanks to the combined efforts of the pissed-off girls. Currently, they had managed to work out their anger at one another by totally the building, an idea Raven had managed to think up after knocking Jinx into the building. Like in their usual catfights, they were now in shredded clothing, leaving bits of skin and even their underwear visible. This is all your fault. Jinx grumbled out angrily, her hair out of its usual horn style and hanging down her neck. Upon hearing the accusation, Raven turned to her with an incredulous expression across her face. My fault. You're the one who started this. Raven reminded while a nearby boulder melted from her powers. Just because you're jealous doesn't mean this is my fault. Raven shouted at her angrily, and Jinx muttered to herself while pulling her legs up to her chest and resting her chin on her knees, arms wrapped around her legs. Yeah, what are you? My psychiatrist. Jinx snarked angrily, and Raven moved over to the rosette and narrowed her eyes onto her. What is your problem with me? Why do you insist on constantly provoking me and making me act like this? What have I ever done to you to make you so hostile towards me? Raven demanded as several rocks were suddenly sent flying into the air by her powers. Looking at Raven with an angry look, the rosette clenched her fists together and grit her teeth. Maybe it's because I like temp way before you, yet he never once noticed me. Jinx growled out, and Raven pinched the bridge of her nose, while mentally chanting her mantra to try and calm down. I've heard that before, and that's not. Raven started only for Jinx to pounce on her and glare at her furiously. No? You don't get it, you condescending bitch. Temsek Sakura had pink hair and a damn near identical body structure to mine. I could easily pass off as her fucking sister if not her damn twin. So how do you think that made him look at me back then? Jinx demanded furiously, and Raven blinked, genuinely surprised by that thought, and it made her calm much faster. Like her, or it at least made him wary of you. She mumbled mostly to herself, and Jinx threw her hands into the air. Wow, the girl finally gets it. It took me ages just to get to the point where he'd be in the same room as me without anyone else around. It took me half a year to get to the point with him where he wouldn't flinch whenever I was angry. It took me a whole damn year just to get to the point where he trusted me with his life and real name. And yet you didn't even have to wait a fucking week for him to like you. Jinx growled out, and Raven stared at her as she then sat down, crossed both her arms and legs, and seemed to want to burn a hole in the ground with her glare. Jinx, Naruto's not like that. He doesn't think you're like Sakura just because of you look like her. Raven tried to say, and Jinx rolled her eyes and gave Raven an annoyed look. I know that. But it always felt like it whenever he'd flinch when I'd get pissed, and then when I'm finally able to be in his general area without him acting like he needs to keep me calm, you show up, and I'm just his female friend. Do you have any idea how much it hurts to be constantly around the person you care for, but he's already taken? Do you? Jinx demanded, and Raven winced slightly while the girl huddled into herself, leaving only her eyes visible. Looking at the rosette for a moment, Raven suddenly felt more than a little bad for Jinx. While she didn't know how Jinx felt, she knew what it was like to be ignored by someone she cared for. In her case it was her mother, but even that was different in that Naruto was at least Jinx's friend. How much worse for Jinx was it to be around him every day, yet always having him out of her reach. You know, maybe I really am bad luck, not just for people around me, but for myself as well. Jinx muttered, and Raven winced, now feeling bad for the bad luck crack, and rubbed her arm. Well, at least you can express yourself. Raven reminded, and Jinx snorted. Lot of good that does me when the guy I like is taken. Jinx mutters, and Raven mentally groans to herself. Now it seemed Jinx was going into a stage of depression, and while she and Jinx had obviously never gotten along, the rosette was still Naruto's friend, and Raven didn't want something to happen to her. Well, at least you can fully control your powers. Raven reminded, and yet again Jinx snorted and gave her an annoyed look. Oh yeah, how could I ever forget that? I can cause bad luck, how is it something good? Especially considering every Friday the 13th causes them to go crazy and make weird shit happen. And let's not forget I cause electronics to blow up if I'm not careful with them. Like, oh I don't know, an old man's pacemaker if I get too close exploding. Jinx shouted at the violet-eyed Titana with tears at the edges of her eyes, and Raven blinked for a moment. Oh, I guess that is kind of dangerous. Raven admitted, if only to herself, while Jinx crossed her arms over her legs and glared at nothing. Watching the other girl for a moment, Raven then sighed and started to roll a pebble under her foot. Maybe I have been just a little too nasty towards her. Jinx is Naruto's friend, and all I ever do is fight with her and make her feel worse about me and Naruto being together. Raven mused to herself and then took a deep breath while turning to look at Jinx, as she continued to glare at nothing. Jinx, she said softly, and the rosette's eyes glared towards her. What? She snapped, and Raven sighed once more. I'm sorry. Raven said, and Jinx raised a brow before grunting. Not your fault, I'm bad luck. She replied bitterly, and Raven crossed her legs while looking up to the sky as the sun started to set. No, I mean I'm sorry for always fighting with you. Raven then said, and Jinx merely tried to wipe the tears from her eyes. Whatever. She mumbled, and Raven looked over to her and then drummed her fingers on the ground. My powers, you're right, I can cause a lot of damage with them as well. But at least with you, you don't have to keep how you feel inside all the time. Raven reminded, and Jinx blinked while turning to the violet-eyed girl with a raised brow. If I had a chance to choose between having bad luck or my own powers, I think I'd take yours. Raven then added with a weak smile and grimaced as something flew into the air, causing a smirk to cross Jinx's lips. Yeah, I guess electronic stuff is easier to avoid than feeling emotion, isn't it? Jinx mused aloud, and Raven sighed softly while nodding her head. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Raven then said, and Jinx raised a brow towards her. Seeing the look, Raven crossed her legs, thus hovered a few feet off the ground, while placing her hands onto her knees. When we met, I was Naruto's girlfriend and you were the girl who likes him. Maybe we should try to be just Raven and Jinx, and not include our relationships with Naruto. Raven offered, and Jinx looked away for a moment while mulling that over to herself. I thought you hated me cause I went in your room that one time. Jinx then noted, and Raven blinked before frowning. That too. She admitted, and Jinx smirked slightly before both girls sighed. So what, do you want to try and be friends or something? Jinx asked, and Raven snorted while looking away from the other girl. Never going to happen. Raven stated, and Jinx looked at her before nodding her head in agreement. But like you said, let's try not to be so violent towards each other. Or at the very least, let's at least try not to provoke each other all the time. If for nothing else, then for Naruto's sake. Raven then offered the other gray-skinned girl, and Jinx blew into her bangs before nodding her head. I can live with that. She mused before stretching out her arms with a light yawn. Well then, I should probably find a way back home before the others come looking for me. Jinx said while standing up, and Raven gave her a look. What? There's that question with a raised brow, and Raven crossed her arms over her chest. Your clothes are almost completely tattered and some of your underwear is showing. Raven stated, and Jinx looked down at herself before blushing slightly and giving her a look as well. Yeah, and who exactly did that? She questioned angrily while crossing her arms, and Raven pinched the bridge of her nose. I thought we were trying not to provoke each other. Raven noted, and Jinx gave her a cheeky smile in response. Bad habits are hard to break. Jinx replied, and Raven rolled her eyes while the slender girl then rubbed her arms. So, if you don't mind me asking, what's your brilliant idea to get me home? Jinx questioned, and Raven silently got up, then threw her cape around Jinx, causing both girls to disappear into a black raven-shaped bird that went towards Tartarus HQ. Titan's Tower. Seriously dudes, how come I'm the only one who's not totally bummed out or tired? Beast Boy asks while sitting in the T-car with Nightwing and Kid Flash, Cyborg, driving them towards Titan's tower as Donna and Star fly home. Currently, they were driving along the underwater bridge that connected Titan's island with the mainland, and thereby Jump City. I don't know, maybe cause we actually tried to catch those Tartarus creeps. Cyborg offered with a scowl, and Beast Boy rolled his eyes with a smirk while leaning back in his seat, Nightwing mumbling under his breath and Kid Flash giving a light groan. Dudes, I know pranksters, and these guys are pros at it. If you guys were smart, you would have stayed out of their way. Besides, they didn't steal anything or hurt anyone today, well, besides stealing that guitar and hitting me with it, but I digress. Beast Boy said and got glares from the other male Titans, before Starfire came down to the side of the T-car and tapped on the window. Blinking, Cyborg rolled down the window as she did and saw a look on the alien princess's face. Star, what's wrong now? Cyborg asked and Starfire sighed visibly as they came out of the tunnel and onto Titan's island. I believe that the Tartarus did not only do the pranking of the city. Starfire replied before pointing towards Titan's tower, the guys all turning to see it. Oh hell no. Cyborg said while bringing the T-car to a screeching halt and quickly got out of it. The other Titans boys as well as the girls then followed him as they all looked up at Titan's tower. The tower was now completely covered in graffiti, all manner of phrases in both English and Japanese completely covered it, as well as random pictures of red X skull mask with peace signs, swirls, and other such graffiti. The biggest of the English phrases however was in bright orange, welcome home Titans. Hope you like what I did with the place. Love X. Dude. Good one. Beast Boy suddenly called out while holding his sides, and Nightwing slapped his face as Cyborg twitched, then grit his teeth in fury. They tagged our crib. The titanium teen cried out, and Kid Flash groaned while looking up at the building. That's going to take forever to wash off. Kid Flash mumbled before grunting and holding his stomach, then quickly ran into the tower, so he could get to a bathroom. Growling, Cyborg began to grind his teeth together as he gazed at the defacement of his beloved tower with narrowed eyes. Oh, I'm so gonna get them for this. Cyborg shouted while unlocking his sonic cannon and Nightwing nearly pinched the bridge of his nose. Cyborg calmed down. Night ordered before charging forward, and Cyborg gave the spiky-haired teen an incredulous look. Where the hell are you going? We need to hunt them down, wait. Cyborg demanded furiously, only for Night to hold up a hand and turn to him tiredly. Cyborg, chill out, we can worry about catching Tartarus later. Beast Boy is right, they were just playing around with us today, not doing anything malicious. As for right now, I'm going to bed so I can forget that this day ever happened. Knight said while continuing to walk towards the tower, and Cyborg gaped towards his leader. What? But they tagged our crib. We can't let that go unchallenged or else they'll. Cyborg started ranting while following after Nightwing, leaving Donna, Star, and Beast Boy behind them. Blinking and scratching his head, Beast Boy then turned to Donna with a raised brow. So what about you? He asked, and Donna gave him a look before sighing. I'm with Richard, I'm going to bed. She mumbled to herself while flying into the tower, thus leaving Beast Boy and Star behind. Looking to one another, the two remaining Titans shrugged before walking towards the tower as well. So how was your day then, Star? Beast Boy asked with a smile, and Starfire clasped her hands together happily. It was most informative, friend. I believe that I have learned something new about earthly culture. However, it was also somewhat of an annoyance to have to rescue friend Nightwing from the obsessed girls of fans once more. Starfire replied, and Beast Boy nodded his head slowly while they walked into the main hall of the tower. But please, tell me about your day, friend. Starfire said cheerfully to the green jester, and Beast Boy grinned while wrapping his arms behind his neck. Well, besides getting smacked around by a chick on a moped with a bass guitar. It was pretty cool for me as well. I got to see my girlfriend today and even get ice cream half off. Beast Boy replied happily as they walked through the main hall of the tower, and Starfire smiled brightly. That is most wonderful. I only wish that the others could have had as pleasant a day as we have had. Starfire said, and Beast Boy nodded his head in agreement as he and the alien princess got into the elevator so they could head up to their rooms. Tartarus HQ. You tagged Titan's tower. Oh man, that is so fucking rich, temp. Gizmo demanded of Naruto while half laughing as he looked at a series of photos and even a live feed of the tower. Currently, Tartarus was back in their HQ. Naruto was sitting on the sofa without his mask, while most of the others were either trying to hold back laughter or were falling over due to it. Yeah, I know, I'm way too awesome, aren't I? Naruto said with a nod of his head and a smirk as he watched Wayla actually try to stifle her laughter, only to fail miserably as she fell onto her back, held her stomach and rolled on the floor. How did no one see you do that? Dunny asked with a grin as she tried to control her own laughter, and Naruto whistled to himself. That is a trade secret, my young apprentice. Naruto stated while leaning back, and Donnie pouts and crosses her arms. Behind him, an amused Blackfire places a hand over her mouth as she snickers and then shakes her head. Impressive. You not only tagged Titan's tower, but in the middle of broad daylight and out in the open where anyone could have seen what you were doing, yet somehow didn't. Blackfire noted and Naruto nodded his head, proud that he was still able to pull something like that off. However, when he heard the door slide open behind him, Naruto leaned back to see Raven and Jinx walk into the room. Jinx is now wearing a new set of clothes, as is Raven. However, once they entered the room, Jinx started snickering to herself while Raven crossed her arms. Well, that explains where you were all day. Raven notes and Naruto shrugs his shoulders in response. Walking over to the sofa, Jinx sits down while Raven stares at the screen, which is showing all of Tartarus, the tower completely covered in graffiti. Don't you think you might have gone just a little overboard? Raven asked and Naruto scoffed while waving her off, and the rest of Tartarus decided to further answer her question. No? They all stated and then laughed once more, causing Raven to roll her eyes and give Naruto a look. Seeing the look and remembering their date, the ex-nin got up and stretched out his arms for a moment. Well guys, I'm heading out with Card-chan. See you whenever I get back. Naruto offered while flipping back and made his way into the base so he could change his clothes, Raven following. Seeing this, Jinx let out a sigh and slumped in her seat, even the sight of Titan's tower covered in graffiti not cheering her up. Deep within the cavern below Jump City, two monsters look on from beyond a portal of red energy. Trigun and Kyuubi both look on silently to the flowing energy below them, Kyuubi's grin widening as he sees the fists from before ball and curl. Chuckling, the red-furred Kitsune then looks over to Trigun with an insidious grin stretched across his face. So, the time has finally arrived. Kyuubi questioned with his grin seeming to grow wider by the second. Trigun merely chuckled and narrowed his eyes for a moment before steam and mist began to rise up around them. Yes Kyuubi, I can safely say. Trigun started to say only to fall silent as the hand gripped the earth and a body slowly emerged from the depths. The body was more skeleton than anything else, twitching and turning to see both of them before a single blazing red eye narrowed, an S-shaped scar carved into his right eye socket. Taking several steps forward, the skeleton held up its arms, reddish orange energy, thus traveled down his arms, flowing over his body before finally ending as it rose up over his head, concealing the skeleton behind a familiar suit of armor. The suit of armor was mostly black and made of a thin, strong, durable and highly flexible material, with a thicker gray material around his midriff, around his elbows, and covering his hands and fingers. Over top that was an odd metal collar, wrapping around his neck, throat and collar completely, a bandolier over his chest, with a metal plate positioned over either bicep. His arms were covered by a pair of black bracers with metal plates. Over top them, a gray utility belt is worn around his waist. Metal plates cover the sides of his thighs, are positioned over his knees, and fall down his shins as a pair of greaves. Last is the metal that is formed over the soles of his boots and curves to cover the instep of his foot as well. However, his most distinguishing piece of armor is a mask that completely hides his head and face, the eye of it glowing a brilliant red before it closes. The mask is a solid steel one with 4 thin slits for air, with padding over his ears, while more metal curved over the back of his head like a helmet. The left side of the frontal plate of the mask is a copper color, with only the black mark over the eye hole that curled up at the side breaking from this. Opening his eye back up after a second, the armored man then slowly folded his arms behind his back, while gazing to the two demons. It is time. The voice of Slade echoed throughout the cavern, his cyclopean gaze narrowing dangerously. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.